Welcome to a weekly Wizardly review. Every week we take works or content from the DM's Guild to review. This is where we break them down and see how it all fits together, then evaluate them based on a few points. Lore, difficulty in implementation, balance, player intrigue and draw, and then we cap off finally with some personal points which won't be factored into our 10-star scoring system. Now, before we jump in, we have a special announcement because we've been given a special review and a wonderful opportunity to review a brand new product. Today, we are going to be reviewing the Black Void adventure module, Dark Dealings in the Shaded Souq. Now, Eric, I'm going to let you take this away from here because just before we jump in, we're going to give you guys a little bit of information on what this whole thing is about.
100%. Give you guys the context. So, Dark Dealings in the Shaded Souq. It's a Black Void scenario, and it's an adventure module for the Black Void TTRPG. So Dark Dealings in the Shaded Souq takes the protagonists on an exhilarating adventure, introducing the characters to the intrigue and the viciousness hidden beneath the pristine facades and gilded domes of the Camellia district. So while establishing the contact with the burgeoning human commune within the Camellia district, the protagonists find themselves framed for massacring exotic animals belonging to the powerful Gurayab Guild. So, incriminated in a virulent conspiracy and seeking to exonerate themselves before vigilante justice catches up to them, they unwittingly stumble across a plot with implications far beyond the Eternal City. So, the protagonists have to use whatever guile, diplomacy, and martial prowess that they can muster to survive the intricate maneuverings of traitors, esoteric beings, and callous killers alike.
We're actually going to give a little bit more information about the Black Void D12 system. So this adventure is an 89-page full-color PDF adventure for the Black Void RPG. It is ideally suited for characters each in the 65 to 75 character point range. Now for those of you that don't know what that is, more in the long review, you'll see it there. There's 15 plus enticing antagonists and other NPCs. There's 3 novel custom creatures with full stats, artwork, and descriptions. There's new detailed areas and locations and maps that all work within the core Black Void scenario. This is the first ever release stats for the Jinissar squads, Civic Guards, and more. After that, we have the easily usable and flexible starter plot line with suggestions on how to tie this into your own story if you're working in the Black Void campaign already. There are original artworks and by the core artists from the original Black Void scenarios.
Which is why, honestly, it's so beautiful.
Absolutely. This adventure is indispensable resource for arbiters eager to introduce the Camellia district to their players and further the merchant quarter of Lydia the Eternal.
Lynn. Yeah.
Lynn.
Yeah, no worries.
Dark Dealings in the Shaded Souq is the first in a series of Black Void scenarios that can be played separately or readily integrated into ongoing campaigns. It's a very flexible module, and it's really exciting. This storyline is self-contained, but does encompass events tied to the grand campaign, making it a must-have accessory for the discerning Black Void players and arbiters.
100%. So, with that full description, you understand the context, and now we will jump into our lore section. See you there.
Alright, jumping into our lore section, Eric, the first question goes to you. Is there character/item lore in this module?
The next few answers are all going to start sounding the same, James. Yes, there's definitely a lot of lore on everything, honestly.
You know what? I agree. Each of the notable NPCs has a bunch of lore and detailing given to them, so a DM or arbiter has every opportunity to roleplay a lovable NPC.
So my question to you is there location lore?
Yes, and yes, there is.
I think what James is trying to say, guys, is yes, this story and location is steeped in a dark fantasy Middle Eastern mythos, and there's a lot of fantasy mixed into this.
You know what? The next question I have for you is there an overall plot? Which is a silly question, because there is.
Yes, absolutely. It's a well crafted and intricate plot that has several layers to the story, many of which can have elaborations on characters and other side stories.
You know what? Definitely, I agree. The way the plot weaves itself into encounters and the rumor dialogue is amazing, I feel.
Yeah, so how would you feel the adventure hook is, if there is any?
I wouldn't say hook as much as it is drags the player kicking and screaming in a good way. But that's what lends to this adventure's diverse, living, breathing, dark environment.
Yeah, I also feel that the hook fits quite well with the pre-established dark fantasy setting, and like you said, like the city in question itself, it just draws you in.
Yeah, okay, so my question for you is, does it have any tie-offs or loose ends in this story?
You know what? Honestly, it's kind of hard to nail this one down. It depends on how deep your players are willing to go and how successful the Arbiter is at running the adventure and how they are in the adventure itself. James?
Okay, you know what? A point I'd like to tack on here is that if you complete the story, you shouldn't have any loose ends. The only loose ends that may occur, like you mentioned, are the ones that might be intertwined with NPCs and depending on how things played out.
Okay. So then, would you say that, does this fit in pre-established kind of D&D lore at all?
See, this is difficult to answer in short, but no. Its main connection is the basis for some of the monsters and certain themes.
Gotcha. Yeah, honestly, 110%. It's designed to be its own standalone world. It is its own TTRPG, so it's not fair to use the D20 system because for all intents and purposes, it is completely different. It does have content and mechanics, though, that will feel familiar to people who have played D&D, though. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So this brings us to our star rating. We've rapid fired through our questions here. So how do you feel the lore is star rating wise for the lore section?
Honestly, I know this is kind of, maybe with the stuff that we've chosen to review, maybe getting a little redundant, but honestly, Black Void, 10 out of 10 for the lore. It is unbelievably crafted. It is so rich, deep, and like we mentioned, it literally drags you in, kicking and screaming, into this world, and just, yeah, it's fantastic. Honestly, it's really fantastic. That's all that I would have to say on the short side of it.
Okay, so star rating. I know my scoring, and I'm pretty sure after we've talked about it a little off camera, was a solid 10 out of 10 for this lore section.
110%.
Excellent.
So, as always, there's going to be a full-length spoiler-filled review that you can check out in the description below. If not, we'll see you in the next section, which is difficulty. Alright guys, welcome to the full-length review. We're going to be starting off with our lore section. So James, let's just dive right in there. I'm just going to go full bore on this, and
Absolutely.
then I will pass the torch off to you.
Perfect.
So I made some notes because there's quite a lot to talk about in the full length here, and I just want to be honest with all you guys. I don't want to be reaching for anything in my head, so I just made a couple notes and I'll just refer to them. So sorry for the whatever looking down or whatnot. So I just wanted to talk in terms of the lore in the Black Void is much like the plot of a book. However, it's not entirely fixed or set in stone. It's tremendously flexible, and that in no short form is due to the work that the creators put in to make that happen. It's constructed, in my mind, almost like a puzzle box. So what I mean by that is the team at Black Void, they give you all the pieces, and then they show you how they assembled it, or how to make a similar picture yourself as an arbiter, or they just, at the end of the day, you have all the puzzle pieces, go make your own damn picture.
Exactly, yeah.
That's at least how I looked at it and how I consumed it myself. Oh my goodness, sorry about that. Anyways, what else did I note in here? Yeah, there's so much room for deep emotional gameplay because of the dark fantasy setting that is established with this. I think that's a really good benefit that this work has, essentially, is a deeper and like just a deeper theme. Anything that you want to touch on that?
So I want to say, I know it's been mentioned in our short video and it's probably going to get mentioned a few more times, but overall, this dark fantasy setting has been really well put together. And you're right, the emotion and the severity of this module is baked into it. It's really well written, and I mean, jokingly, I'd say there's almost too much lore, because there's so much to play around with, but it's awesome because there's always little spots, like you said, with the puzzle pieces. There's always places to put this lore.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm gonna point out just before I give it back to you,
Yep.
the section that is talked about for all the NPCs, all the notable NPCs, they literally go down to like city guards.
Yes.
City guards are named and are given just a
Persona.
brief explanation of like, okay, this person works in this district and or over by this location, and this is how they interact with this, and if your characters interact with them like this, then this.
110%. There's so much that you can scale up or down on this. It's truly up to the Arbiter, which always scores a lot of points with us, because if it's in the Arbiter's hands to make the decisions, then that makes it as flexible, like that makes it more flexible, which always scores more points with us, because then again, the less work that an Arbiter has to do, the better, and you can offset that work by providing more material. Right?
Exactly.
So just another nice note that I had in here. As you know, James, maybe not for most of our viewers, and it's not something that I like to talk about very often, or tooting my own horn or whatever, but, you know, for being a pretty cultured and, you know, decently traveled white guy,
we call him Mr. Worldwide. Sorry, Pitbull. Move aside.
You know, like the lore that's in here is so very much Middle Eastern themed and draws from a lot of things, like, for example, the Arabian Nights, and just like a mythology from that region of the world. That, you know, some of it I've had some experience with, and other things completely new that when I delved into it, like I like to, and just get, you know, go on a full lore hunt, essentially, really shocked me. One of those things was the daughter of the Jinn, Asha is her name, is a Gula. And a Gula, I found out, like, this was not prior knowledge to me, despite having, you know, lived in the Middle East for about 6 to 7 months, in Abu Dhabi in particular, was that a Gula is a female ghoul, and that ghouls actually originate in Arabic folklore and mythology.
Right.
I thought, honestly, I was, I guess, ignorant to this. I thought it was maybe more of a Western construction, but the Western construction is more popular. And then now to kind of, through this lore, kind of go back to the origins, I'm a nerd. That kind of tickles me.
And if I'm not mistaken, you had mentioned that a Gula is always the daughter of an evil Jinn.
Correct. So it all meshes together, and the Gulas were known for having voracious appetites, which again links directly into the plot line of this entire adventure.
Very well done, good sir. Very well done.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, I could go on in its own video pointing out all the different words that have kind of like, what do you call it, head nods, or just directly translate into Arabic. The only one that I'm going to mention is just one that I was kind of proud of, which is the Arijawani Tavern. Now, that word, I'm not going to, in case I'm probably 100% mispronouncing it, but it means purple or lilac, like in Arabic. And I was writing that in my notes when I first saw it described on like page 3 or 4, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Where they describe the different settings, but then to find it on page 15, where they do translate it, like they don't say that it's in Arabic. They just translate it as, most commoners refer to it as the Purple Tavern, and I was like, yes, I got it.
It's always a wonderful feeling to pick up those little subtle things that writers put into their work, and I know that we've done some of that with our own work that we will have coming out eventually.
100%. So I just wanted to note that for you guys at Black Void, that people pick up on this and that people find it really rewarding and interesting. At least I can say I do. When we come across these little nuggets that you've sprinkled in there, don't ever think that you're just doing it for yourself. People will take notice, and this is really what helped push that score into the 10 out of 10 perfect scale.
Absolutely. And although the video's not up just yet, the Night of Masks and Monsters, they also did things very similar to that, and that was also another reason they got some good points there.
100%.
And just putting in that little extra effort to use the proper words, or to even just Google Translate something and put it in there was and is a great way to score some extra points.
The last things that I just had to note there too was the net here, right? That's also kind of interesting because the Gula eats it and gets foresight.
Yeah.
A net here is also referred to as one who sees, and it is directly talked about in regards to the prophets. So that's another nice nod. And the last bit of lore that I personally, this is a personal note, so outside of the objective criteria, that I really liked is the person that you talk to in the tea house. I literally, picturing myself as a character in this universe, would love to go sit down, drink tea, and smoke some shisha with this character all day long and just talk about esoteric things. I love it.
Yes.
Just the vibe, how it's described, that character, how they talk. I want to be there. Which is just my final and closing note on the lore as a whole, is that it is so deep, rich. It's just got to bathe in it.
Absolutely.
And the kind of lore that's there is it's dark, but yet it's so rich and full of life. It's not grim dark, which is something I personally have a gripe against, right? There's still beauty to be had and beholden within it, which is something that I just really love. And, it has the Middle Eastern vibes, but it also has some sort of Lovecraftian vibes too, with the very alien species that are involved and prominent, because humans are very less prominent in this work. So it really engages the mind with the foreign and kind of what is this other entities. And lastly on that, putting the players at the table in the shoes of people who experience extreme prejudice, I think is something that we can all need to take note of, because not a lot of games will willingly subject your players to that. So that might be something you need to discuss with your players. But I think it's always important that an artistic medium take a leap and take a chance at self-reflection in terms of human and humanity.
No, exactly. Right? To kind of build on some of those points, one of the things I really strongly agree with you on is that there is so much vibrant life within this lore that, if for nothing else, pick this up just to get the lore. Just for the story itself, if nothing else, because it is so well put together. That was another thing I was going to say. It's hard to poke holes in it. It's hard to poke holes in
the plot.
The plot. So I'm that kind of person that might sit there, not in the movie theater, no, but post movie theater, I poke holes in the movie, and I'm like, this flaw, this flaw, this flaw. But I couldn't do that with the storyline. It made sense. I was
going to say, sorry, even with the multi-tiered and layered
Yes.
antagonists and
Yes.
protagonists, and the conflicting interests that abound here. It all fits. It makes sense. That's
does.
why people would be at odds with each other. So carry on.
No, exactly. And to talk about the antagonists, the main big bad evil guy are Jin
Zagan.
Zagan. Yes, I was trying to remember.
No
the name
worries,
off
I
the top of
got
my
you.
head.
That's why we're a team.
Exactly.
Come on, guys.
So Zagan was actually also dealing with a warlord who was working through the plains,
Yep.
and was also looking for the creature that would give foresight if consumed.
100%.
Because he thought it would give him greater prowess and capability in battle. And that was one of those things where you could just leave that thread and never talk about it.
And in fact, it's encouraged that this is literally just somebody in the background, ominous as all heck.
So,
And
for anyone watching this, who knows, maybe if you pick this up and you go through it, maybe you'll find out another big bad guy for the next add-on. I don't know. This is supposition. Sorry, Black Void, not putting words in your mouth, but you know.
nope. But I mean, still, these are these are things that an arbiter can run wild with. And this is why I described it as a puzzle box rather than like a toolkit or something like that. Because, like I said, they're
You
just
can
so
put
versatile.
it's a moldable puzzle, I think, is the best way to put it together.
Yeah.
No, you know what? Pun intended. So to kind of wrap this whole section up for ourselves, very well done. The lore is extremely vibrant, and yeah, we could spend half a dozen videos just breaking down this lore and going through it. Who knows? Maybe one day we will. But for now, awesome work. Great job. Keep it up.
110%. I have nothing else to say. With that, we will see you in the next section, which is difficulty. All right, so on to our difficulty section. So my first question for you, James, is how much study was required of the DM or arbiter?
You know, as someone who has only ever really listened to podcasts of people playing with a D12 system, it was a simple Google search and reading a few articles for me, and I was very able to pick it up.
Okay, no,
Eric?
I completely agree. I also liked how the Black Void series does provide its players the core rule set to help expand on the finer points of the D12 system.
Okay, so my question for you is, how much study was needed for the players?
Well, like we just said, it was very much a pick up and go kind of scenario. Same for the players as well. You could just take this and run with it.
You know what? I agreed. I'd say the only thing that needed study for both DMs and players was learning the setting overall, which is easy when it's really so well written.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Eric?
So yeah, were there any charts, maps, or tables?
Loads. Absolutely loads. There was and is an abundance of maps, tables, and the DM guidelines. That and even the creators made a specific section for all the maps and tables so you don't have to flip back and forth.
I gotta say, that's pretty nice.
Yeah. Eric?
Agreed. Like, something I noticed, and I know it's a small point, but I think it's a good one to bring up nonetheless, is that the DM guidelines were all highlighted in different colors as to easily identify them when you read through and you're skimming over kind of the important parts.
Okay, so I'm going to fire a question at you. What was the level of in-game difficulty?
Okay, so this is a point that we're going to be elaborating in on our full-length review, but for here right now, it's important just to note that the in-game difficulty in terms of combat is easily suited for your group and because of the hard work of the creators.
Exactly. So the only thing I'd like to add there is that this does depend a lot more heavily on the knowledge of one's character. So typical D20 systems can help guide players with skill checks and the like, but more on that later. Eric?
So how would you say the integration of this works with like pre-existing campaigns or adventures?
This is one of those one of the only places I could see where this work docks marks. If your table is playing a D20 system, making this change to a D12 system, although easy in theory, can be difficult.
Okay.
Eric?
I would say not only that, but this world doesn't exactly mesh with the typical D&D, especially Faerun setting universe. But if you were to use the wider Forgotten Realms setting, such as Kalimshan, a DM could make it work if you really wanted to use the D20 system.
Okay, so my question for you is, who or what type of party do you think this is geared towards, and how hard would it be to mesh these together?
Gotcha. All right. Well, although the D12 system really lends to an easier approach to TTRPGs in general, this is definitely geared towards an RP-heavy group who are interested in darker themes.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? This makes things a little difficult for the common murder hobo groups or the war gamers, but it's still playable. Eric?
Okay, yeah, finally, I guess, what would you say is the payoff in-game and out-of-game?
As always, so the in-game payoff isn't much in the way of loot as much as it is gratification and surviving the world. I have a few notes on that for the long review.
Okay, so of course, and once again, as we've said in other reviews, the payoff is mainly around your table, whether that be Skype, Zoom, or whatever in these current COVID days.
Exactly.
So my question for you is the reward to the in-game difficulty, like the ratio, is it appropriate?
Okay, so as a DM, I gotta say the difficulty to payoff ratio is honestly excellent. Not only does the creator have a means to scale difficulty for over-leveled and under-leveled characters, but they already have a broad range of the difficulty can scale across. Eric?
Okay, honestly, you nailed it, James. Now, because of the nature of this dark fantasy and the fact that it's a D12 system, the typical loot and things play a lesser role, and your reward is more straight up survival and continuing the plot, plus the experience points gained from the encounters themselves, which as a writer and creator, I feel is a fantastic way to reward the players instead.
No, you know what? I agree. Like I said before, I do have a few more points on this for our long review. However, this does bring us to our star rating. Where did you feel your out of 10 rating for difficulty would lie?
Okay, if I'm being honest, and it's not because this doesn't mean that the work itself is not fantastic, which it is. But I would honestly put the difficulty at a 7 for me personally, just because there is some serious leaps and bounds for people to jump through to get into this game. They really, it's truly its own game, and you have to be willing to know that and to accept that coming in, willing to go with the D12 system and just all those other sort of core mechanics that you need to learn, and especially if you're coming from a different TTRPG, things in our minds might end up getting a little scrambled. So that's me personally.
No,
How about you, James?
Exactly. To be honest, I'm kind of on the same page there with a 7. Not for the same reasons. Mine was more well, it'll be elaborated on in the long review. I don't want to take much more time ranting, but suffice to say, I agree with the 7-star rating for this one. So for the difficulty section, it's getting a 7 out of 10. If you want more on that, please go check out our long review, and we will have timestamps down there, so if you just want to skim through, feel free. Otherwise, we'll see you in our balance section.
All right, everybody, welcome to the difficulty section in the full-length review. Again, spoilers abound, and let's get into it, James.
Absolutely.
I know that this is one section that you are always the master of, in terms of just having lots to say and good things to say. So I'm just gonna lead off with just one point just to get us started.
Yep.
And I think I know you can take it from here. So just for me, one thing I noticed in terms of when we're talking about the difficulty of implementation for both DMs and for players alike, I noted that for new players, this could honestly be hard to get into because of the barriers of entry to learning a new game first, and then putting it to the test.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, it would be better played as it's recommended in terms of the recommended 65 to 75 points for each player, because if like I know that it's designed that you can play it at lower power levels or higher, but like I said, for new players coming in, it should be at the recommended, because otherwise an arbiter wouldn't know how to properly scale, is what I'm saying here with that. And so I also feel like for somebody who's coming into this from having previous TTRPG experience, whether that be Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, whatever it may be, I think they would have a better chance of getting into the swing of things in terms of like the game mechanics and things like that, because they have had previous experience playing an RPG, right? And as long as they had an experienced, in my mind, Black Void Arbiter, then it could go really well.
Yeah.
And, that ultimately leads to my last point, which is, you just need to have a skilled game master. Like, even if they haven't done Black Void before, you need to have a skilled game master, in my opinion, in order to bridge this gap. Which is why it did take some hits for us in the difficulty section. And this leads me to you, which has to do with the fact that, something we can't look past. In order to play this adventure, you really do need to have the core rule book. James?
Okay. So, first, let me say, I totally get it. It's a Kickstarter project. It's your own universe, and you made your own core rule book, and this is an add-on scenario.
110%. So, for all intents and purposes, it is 99% assumed that everybody that you have the core rule set already.
Exactly.
And you're waiting for this to come, because this is part of your reward for backing. We understand that, and for that reason, we didn't ding it for that point. We just want to make that clear.
Correct.
However, on principle, via the objective criteria...
So, via the objective criteria, if this was any other module in any other situation, what we looked at was there were several pages and points where it was referenced. Go check, page 297 of the player's core manual. What? I mean that with all due respect, of course. Again, still fantastic work, but what? Because this... It's an adventure module. Everything that you need for that module should be contained within that module.
To make it really get that 10 out of 10 score for us.
Yep.
Again, we're talking about versatility. Again, we're talking about making things easier on arbiters and players alike to be able to play the thing, right? That's where our scoring comes into play. There are other TTRPGs and examples of companies that do put it all in together, and there's examples where they have not, and the reaction by people also usually speaks volumes about this as well. One example that I have to draw on is Storm King's Thunder from Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast. There was a lot of controversy surrounding it because of the fact that it was so open world. You have the entirety of Faerun to run this campaign through, and they give you bare bones descriptions of some of the most iconic and important locales, and it's up to the DM to be able to flesh those out if the players choose to go to those locations. Now, it wouldn't be an issue if they had given some more thorough descriptions to go off of, and the DM can kind of then use their information of that area either from the established novels or even just the Wikipedia that's there, or just their own thoughts, which is fine, but it could also cause some conflict at the table with people who have already an envisionment of what maybe Mirabar looks like, Neverwinter looks like. But the main gripe was that people, in order to flesh that out, that huge part of the campaign and storytelling out, is they had to have the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, which was a separate standalone book which described a lot of the Sword Coast and its locations in fuller detail. Now, the problem is we're not all made out of money. Simple fact. And we're not most people do not want to have to go and buy another product in order to play a product they're really interested in.
Yeah.
And that might be the deciding factor why somebody leaves something on the shelf.
No, exactly. And, once again, just want to be very, very clear. This was not factored into the score.
100% not. Because this is a personal opinion.
Because we're coming in from the outside and we didn't have access to the core rule book per se.
No.
And we, obviously those were things we noted.
Yeah.
But this is something that is a part of our objective criteria.
Yes.
And if you haven't checked that out, go check out that video. It really lays out how we look at things and
in
how
each section.
Exactly.
And like I mentioned at the beginning of this section, right? It has to do with the versatility. How easy are you making it on the arbiters and the players? So you could have made it easier because you only referenced 6 to 7 pages throughout the entire adventure plot. Honestly, what's 6 to 7 extra pages? I understand the costs of printing. I do. But, to include those pages at the back, where you have all the rest of your maps and the monster stats, and thank goodness that you did include those that had descriptions in there. Otherwise, could have lost some more points, honestly. But because that's all there, and then if you included that as well in the back, this would have honestly scored extremely high for us.
Yeah.
Just something so slight could have made a huge difference.
Absolutely. And again, it's not saying that this product is bad.
No.
We believe
No.
it is still an amazing work.
Incredible.
This is the objective review process that has been missing a lot in today's YouTube
Yep.
and television, magazines, everything, is that they do it to please the person they're reviewing the stuff for.
Yep.
And we are based in, like we've said before, integrity,
Yep.
honor, and
Yeah.
honesty.
And to be honest, a 7 out of 10 is still a great score. That's
Absolutely.
above average. Like, please
Absolutely.
keep this in mind.
Yeah.
And the difficulty to implement is not it is above average. It is relatively easy, like we said in the short form review. For the arbiter and for players, it is plug and play. It's pick up and go, because you don't really have any other options, really. Like you know that this is what you're getting into, and you're going to have to do some legwork and kind of figure these things out.
Exactly.
We're just saying that it could have been made that much easier if they included those pages in the back. Also, understanding printing costs and things of that nature. Maybe you didn't even need to include all of it in the back, but maybe just a little bit more
PDF.
Yeah, or more fleshed out descriptions on the side, like you do with the DM text bubbles and blocks, is literally a couple extra sentences just to flesh it out, so that the arbiters have something to go off of, rather than having to go into the other book, to the other page, and back and forth, right? So kind of like what you did with the maps. If you were just able to do that.
The maps, the monsters,
Yeah.
all fantastic. The last point I'll make for difficulty was, although yes, it is very plug and play, if this is someone's first time being an arbiter, I don't believe this would be for them.
No. And
Just because of the scope and the scale.
Exactly. If they've never played a TTRPG ever before.
Oh my
correct?
goodness. Yeah, no. Wet your toes, maybe let someone more experienced try it out. But this is definitely well put together.
110%. Because the lore is so rich, because this is so well crafted and to such lengths of degree, I would agree with James, and I did have that in my notes, that it could absolutely intimidate the heck out of a novice arbiter, a first-timer. This could really intimidate them.
And that's kind of where the points were lost.
Absolutely. But On the flip side, and this is why we gave lore such a high rating, the lore is so enticing, it drags you in, that maybe that first-time arbiter can conquer their fear and spend the extra amount of time it would take to get to that skill level that they would need to run this successfully.
So they can survive your adventure.
Absolutely. So we will see you in balance.
All right. Welcome back to our balance section. So remember, balance for us is mechanics, gameplay, environment, encounters, all that stuff kind of intertwined. So I'm going to kick it off with, is the lore balanced within the work?
Okay. Well, yeah, 110%. I have to say that what I find intriguing is the fact that this D12 system complements having a balanced game and lore that drives our characters forward. What about you, James?
You know what? Absolutely. I found that how the adventure module highlights players for certain interactions and consequences was really a great way to balance the interactions and lore in-game to push things forward. Eric?
Okay, so how would you say the combat or non-combat situations are balanced?
Okay, so things like traps. Right, okay. Many of these instances were balanced by the lore and the situations the players get themselves into.
Okay.
Eric?
Yeah, I would agree with you. Just one additional note, though, is that the D12 system does assist fellow players. You're able to assist fellow players in combat and other encounters, which you're not typically can do in a D20 system.
No, you're totally right. Were the mechanics of fights, items, encounters all balanced and flexible within this work?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
After thoroughly reviewing the D12 system and seeing how this adventure was meant to be played, it's fast, it's furious in terms of the style, and it requires far less math than you do in the traditional D20 system.
You know what? Exactly. Now, don't get us wrong, we do love the D20 system and how it has some perks over the D12 and vice versa, but it really does work here. And big shout out to the creators here. Excellent work.
100%. So I would say that brings us to the end for this section. Just like in all of our other reviews, balance is something that we need to leave for the full-length review because there is so many spoilers inherent when talking about the balance because we talk about everything. So
Exactly.
that will just bring us to our wizardly rating. James, what do you think this would score for us in terms of balance?
So, balance-wise, without spilling any beans or tea or what have you, this would sit around an 8.5 for me. Because there were some things that... There are some maybe personal gripes, again, which I might flesh out later, but there are some actual contextual things for encounters and such forth that I think could have been fleshed out better, or just don't necessarily jive with the scenario at hand.
I couldn't agree more. Honestly, I was gonna maybe ding it more towards 8. However, after thinking about personal gripes and setting that aside and just sticking to the objective criteria, I will agree with you on an 8.5. I do believe that there's a lot of merit and a lot of work that went into trying to make a balanced piece of work.
Absolutely.
But especially between the rich, overly abundant lore that is here, as well as with this D12 system. Like I said, yeah. So without further ado, you can either check out the full review again down below, or we'll see you in Intrigue.
All right, welcome to our balance section. So in our long review, what we like to go through for balance is mechanics, encounters, items, and pretty much anything else that would be intertwined with balance, including lore. So like we've mentioned before, the lore really pushes this story, and what that allows the arbiter and players to do is really just immerse themselves and not worry so much about mechanics, which is typically would be kind of a toss-up for points scored or lost. But it worked out in this situation's favor because there were several situations. My personal favorite one that I know we've talked about was the encounter in the market.
Yes, that was a lot of fun.
There's a lot of intricacies that were laid into this, which really, you could definitely see where there were elements of lore and where there was elements of mechanics, and everything was very well laid out, and it wasn't obstructive to one's play style. So, to kind of go into this, there are multiple tiers of gangways between buildings on this market. There's also people around you and other market stalls and things like that where people have snake charmers, or there's other civilians, or there's things going on in this market, and then when something happens, the whole encounter explodes, and you have people coming across the gangways, archers firing down, and the archers, I believe, were given like disadvantage, which is where I believe the lore came in, because you have a thriving market. People are running around screaming, losing their minds because there's a big fight going on. Someone gets plinked with an arrow. I think I'd be at disadvantage aiming a bow 30, 40 feet up. Through a crowd.
Yeah.
And then, not to mention, when you look at any TTRPG, combat isn't just stand there, whack, whack. You got to imagine that even though you're doing it in turn-based scenarios, your characters are still like, they have that Rocky Balboa, I'm ready to fight, and I'm like, okay, let's go. And they're jumping and dodging, and the only reason you do get hit is because, you weren't fast enough, right?
Exactly. It's more dynamic,
exactly.
of an environment, and the way that it's that it plays out and is described.
Exactly. And so that's how the lore balances out the mechanics, because I believe in a D20 system, that sort of height advantage would give them advantage on attack rolls, potentially damage, depending on the DM.
Because technically you could, you have perfect line of sight, right? And that you have that height advantage, right? And
in the typical D&D setting, it would be up to the DM's discretion whether or not they would have advantage or not, plus the introduction of having citizens running around.
Yes.
But typically it would be advantage, and you either hit or you miss, and it just goes into the dirt and nothing gets, no side effects, right?
Yeah, and that's what I have to say I really like about this visceral D12 system. It really lends to the fact of, yes, success and failure, but there's degrees.
Exactly.
And the degrees are a lot smaller, but with greater impact on not only your own characters, for example, getting trampled, and it could be to death, potentially, but, by a crowd if you're not bracing yourself and, and you didn't roll a good strength check, getting trampled, or in that case, missing and taking out innocent civilians, again, lending into that darker theme of the dark fantasy. It all really starts to click and work together and feed off of each other, which is what we talk about when we're looking for something that's really good in terms of balance.
And so one of the things was that I brought up was the snake charmers by the merchant stalls. Once the party kicks off, it's very clearly stipulated that anyone who steps near that has to roll, because they might get bitten by the snake. And that snake might just it was a beautiful way to keep the lore and atmosphere of the marketplace and interweave it into the combat scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah, the environment becomes important.
Yeah.
You, as a player, being observant becomes important.
Exactly.
I think we could all use more of that rather than arbitrarily rolling for what your character sees. To use your mind to
ask
catch
the
those.
questions and dig deeper. And that's something that I'm pretty sure we mentioned in our short review, which was the fact that the D20 system does kind of guide people with the skill checks to be like, okay, well, I'll do a skill check. What skill check can I do? DM says you can do a perception check.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What does that entail? Oh, well, you look around and you see stones. Oh, I have eyeballs. Cool. I'm going to use them. Yeah. And that's supposed to kind of help guide you so you rely less on the skill checks and more on the character development.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, is kind of what brings us to one of our docked marks. I'm going to quickly finish my docked mark, and then I'll pass it over to you because I know you have some notes. The docked mark for this one was that it was the character relying solely on knowing your character and some of the D12 systems a little bit better than falling back on math. And I think that was kind of the toss-up, which is why it didn't receive too big of a hit from me, but it was still kind of a hit because it's like, okay, you still have to rely on things, and just based on how messy the encounters can get.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Because, I mean, without having looked fully in depth at the core rule sets, but looking here at the adventure notes and the notes for,
Yes.
The certain numbers on the D12
Yes.
doing certain things, I understand that it's actually extremely fleshed out.
Yes.
In terms of the different things characters can do, based off of, a 1 to 12 roll, which is far more advanced than in other systems. A D20 included on top of that, which I like personally. I liked it because it's visceral, it's intense. But yes, I would agree with you in that. I would agree with you. Yeah. Ultimately.
That's pretty much all I really had. I mean, like I said, it wasn't that big of a point drop or penalty.
Again, it has to go with the versatility, and again, it's because then the players and maybe the arbiter, if the players are not able to quickly do that, they'll have to step in and quickly rifle through and be like, okay, right, so this. So again, just when we're talking about versatility and making it easier for players and arbiters alike,
and
just a slight knock, sorry.
But yeah, no, it was really just that whole like, okay, you have to, flip back and forth, like you were saying, between the what what your character can do, what you're able to do,
and what are
plus
the rules.
adding what the encounter is, plus the core rules in certain situations. It was a little dive back and forth.
And honestly, let's not even kid for a single second here. Every TTRPG suffers from this everywhere.
Absolutely. So again,
it's in the arbiter's hands at the end of the day.
Exactly. Right. And that's why it was so well balanced, is because it was well put together and very easy to comprehend. I mean, I've never picked up a D12 system until I started reading this one and started working through it.
And the fact that we were able to not only grasp it, but at the end of the day come out liking it better, that should speak for itself.
Exactly. To you?
Yeah, my last note here, just before we move on, is in terms of the balance. I really like that there's 3 ways to play, and it's explained by the authors in the adventure module itself. You can use guile, diplomacy, or swordsmanship to survive. That is the big key underlying thing in this plot, in this campaign, in the Black Void. Your real primary mission is survival as a human. Sure, you have your own personal driving factors and your
character motivation.
Your character, thank you so much. Your character motivation, of course. But ultimately the name of the game is survival, and by what means? By guile, by diplomacy, and by swordsmanship. Yeah. And the cool thing that I liked about it, and this is what scored high for me in terms of balance, is that your enemies have the exact same 3 options available to them on how they interact with the world, with your players. Unlike in other TTRPG systems, where the bad guys can do things that the player characters can't and might not ever be able to do just because the story.
Exactly.
I don't like that. And this is what makes it a dark real kind of fantasy setting for me is that everyone's playing by the same rules and thus can live or die in the same manner.
By their own sword of choice.
Yes, exactly, right? And I just really like that. And it's accentuated even to the point of when you go in each chapter, there's encounters that you can have. Yeah. And there are literally 3 different, sometimes pages, because the boxes get so big, encounters for each encounter with important story arcs and characters and antagonists, that there is literally a scenario where diplomacy, how you would survive and win by that way. So that pretty much sums up the notes that we have for balance in regards to the Black Void. So we will see you in the intrigue section.
See you there.
Bingo.
All right, we have come to our final section, intrigue and player draw. So I'm going to fire off the first question to you, Eric. What about this product caught your eye?
Okay, the artwork! The team of amazingly talented artists that contributed to this project are absolutely phenomenal. Not to mention the stylistic choices and just like the darker tone of the series. It's unlike anything that I've personally seen in settings in an RPG before.
No, you know what? I agree wholeheartedly. The artist did a fantastic job, and a big shout out to the creator and developers for all the wonderful add-ons for this Kickstarter project. The themed DM screens or Arbiter screens, dice. So big shout out to the collaborative art effort here. Wonderful job. Eric?
So when looking through the product information, what told you, James, that this was right for your table?
You know what? For me, it was the dark fantasy setting. As a DM, I always make a point of always asking my players what sort of thematic setting they would like to be playing in, and I'll be honest, making a true dark fantasy, without it being a dark, gloomy, oppressive thing, is difficult. So, hats off. Eric?
110%, man. Like, this was and is a well thought out setting with interesting twists, intrigue, and visceral combat that balances out at most tables.
Absolutely.
So I think that's where we're going to leave it comfortably for the short review here on Intrigue. So once again, description down below for the full-length review on Intrigue. And we're just going to go right into what our wizardly rating for Intrigue is on this project, the Black Void. So James, what would you give it?
So I would give this a solid 9. This product for the intrigue, if we look at just artwork alone, amazing. But we look at the fact that it's a different system, it's its own world and universe that was created by the author and his wonderful team of developers and the artists. So, you know what? It was something new.
Yep.
Dark fantasy setting. I'm in.
110,
I'll give it a shot.
110%. I completely agree with you, and likewise, 9 out of 10 wizardly rating on this one. For more reasons explaining the reason why, again, check down below. Hey there, friends and fiends. Welcome to our intrigue discussion here in the full review. Again, spoilers abound. So, as always, it seems, with our intrigue section, this is where we're just going to splooge a little bit. First and foremost, James and I both want to congratulate the amazing artwork team that has worked on this project, The Black Void, in its entirety. The core rule books and the original books, as well as with this adventure module itself. Just fantastical. James?
Yeah. You know, to the writers, the developers, the artists, first off, just absolutely amazing work. Pat yourselves on the back, you know, put their shoulders back and just feel really good about what you did. Like that, the only other rivaling quality I've seen comes straight from Wizards of the Coast.
100%. In my mind, like when you see some of the concept art in Star Wars, in particular, like The Mandalorian or Clone Wars, yeah, that level. Honestly, it really brought it to life for us both, and especially like the setting art, the alien creature art, and just other species, just really made them feel alive and real. And that's something that cannot be understated when doing a totally new, unique project such as this. You really need that in order to sell it, right?
Absolutely.
Because the writing, for James and I, writing alone could absolutely allow us to envision a world and to get into it. But this really helps people
just get drawn right into it.
And to have a really good visual representation of something that they're reading, talking about, engaging with.
Getting sucked into that void, if you will.
Yes. 110%. On that note, though, of alien species, I will talk about the one point only that I have to talk about in terms of the intrigue. It's more of a nitpick kind of thing, unfortunately, than anything else. Look, I'm a man of a few languages, and I'm all, like, I really enjoy, as you said off camera, xenolinguistics.
Yep.
Right? However, I just think, and this is a personal opinion, and this did not affect the score, just want to preface that some people could definitely be intimidated by some of the very unique spellings and words of the alien species and characters found here in the module, and just in Black Void in general. Especially when there's a little bit of apostrophes and just different sort of accents, configurations, and palatalizations that people, it would be honestly foreign to them. But at the same time, it is alien. It's meant to be foreign. I totally understand that. I dig it. I deeply do. But I'm just saying that for some people, that might detract from their experience, and it could break down play at a table, because some people might, like us, be really invested into something, and here's the thing, if it's not very easy to remember, in other words, kind of monosyllabic, to remember a certain character's name or their race, let alone, it could really lead to some player frustration where they're going through their notes and they're like, what was that called? Arbiter, help me. And then the arbiter's like, just a second, let me check my pronunciation guide. Right? So if there's just maybe a little bit of guide next to the words in terms of like
breaking it down, kind of
pronunciation,
Tolkien it. You know, just that little bit, R-E-Wen or Arwen, right? When you put it all together, just so you can kind of, it's a very, it is a nitpick.
It's a nitpick, honestly, and that's why, like I said, it does not affect the score at all, but just something to note. And I also understand that there's lots of people who are extremely driven by xenolinguistics.
Absolutely.
That's why Klingon is a language that people can actually learn. I understand that. So,
Eldar for the Elvish languages, tons of languages.
110%.
You know what? I couldn't agree more. I really want to emphasize a great job for all the artwork, for the layout within the book as well, because there was a lot of information that was condensed into this book or put into this book, and having to split between the DM notes, what they're just supposed to be reading, the encounter notes and artwork. You did a really good job with layering these essentials on each page. Excellent work. That's what gave it a higher score for me.
110%. I will add my one note in there too, that this is why it scored high, is because it read well. And it sounded well too. On top of that, just all of those things combined, how it looked, how it was laid out, and the information that is present, and how it's written, captivating to the point, and it's important. The only last note on that is just that there was a couple grammatical errors, very minute, like forgetting an S at the end of a word. But mind you, this was in our review copy. It may totally have changed when it releases now for all of you guys. So that is something that we completely overlooked because we weren't sure at the end of the day. So it didn't detract from the points at all.
Yeah, no, and I mean, let's face it, this world is pretty big. There's lots of languages, and you know, if you and your editor both speak several languages and they're trying to edit in a different language, I don't know about you, but for me, I speak one language and I can swear and cuss in a handful of others.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it.
It's so minor. It's like
exactly like honestly,
and like I said, it's probably fixed in the final edition.
And even if it's not, like, you translated from your native tongue to a different one in writing.
Yeah, for sure.
I cut you some slack there.
110%. No, it shouldn't be an issue at all. Any other notes on intrigue in terms of picking what would is the draw for players, DMs to pick this up? Other than the amazing artwork, other than the amazing lore and storytelling, right? So some other good things or some criticisms that we have.
I thank you for the prompt. I definitely found my note again.
So good.
The D12 system.
Right.
So you don't hear, or at least I don't. Maybe I'm just not well cultured enough, which is totally a possibility. But you don't hear a lot of the D12 systems that are out there, and I know there are a bunch. I listened to the Adventure Zone podcast, and they've gone through 3 or 4 different D12 adventure guides, and there are quite a few, and they all kind of work on the same basis, but none of them really have big standoutish names. This series, Black Void, I think would be one of the first ones that I will always remember.
110%. I couldn't agree more.
Not just because we're reviewing it,
No.
and not just because of the quality of content, because I can remember what happened in those other D12 modules. It just didn't stick.
Yeah.
And so I think the way this is comprised, and the fact that the big draw is that it's a different system. It's not the D20.
Yeah.
So, if you're trying to get people into it and they're like, oh, I've played D&D before, I don't really want to try it. Be like, no, it's not D&D.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a D12 system. It's fast, it's furious, and it's got a great style to it.
Yeah, and it really lends to the themes that they're trying to come across with, which is the huge theme about survival and a dark fantasy setting that isn't high fantasy. Like, this is a lot more nitty-gritty. And on top of that, that lends into the intrigue as well in terms of why somebody might want to pick this up, and you definitely should. It's a different theme, not one that's typical in the scene. It's also extremely cultured and informed by real-world cultures, as well as beyond that, in terms of, like I said, somewhat Lovecraftian with the amount of alien races and how truly alien they are, and how that plays on the reflection of like the self and other in terms of humanity. In fact, at the end, like I believe it says, beyond the veil or beyond the void, what remains of humanity, right? And so it's kind of like the open-ended question that this really asks the arbiters and the players alike. So there's, I know we could just kind of go in circles on this.
Oh yeah.
But really, when you boil it down to it, it's that combination of all these factors that really make this really intriguing. And like James said, this will, for me, always stand as the one D12 system that I've seen that, number one, I liked from the sake of the mechanics, but like it as an overall, like it's going to stick with me. It's stuck with me already in terms of recalling things for this review and for this conversation.
Yeah.
Honestly, like,
no, absolutely.
We really enjoyed it. We really wanted to stress just at the end of this that, and the 8.5 final total for this should be understood and reflected that this is extremely amazing work of art.
Absolutely.
And something that everybody needs to at least check out for the sake of just enriching their own mind and knowledge of what is possible in a TTRPG. And definitely not trying to, twist anyone's arm, but like, you would be doing yourself a great service by picking this up and giving it an honest shot, because you might end up with, as with the main goal of all RPGs, some of the best memories and experiences of your life.
Exactly. And if nothing else, all it does is help you escape for just a few hours out of a day and gets you away from the coronavirus, all the crazy stuff going on in the world on a daily basis. That's what this is all about. That's why artists are so important to humanity, is
110%.
that they're the break. They're the break from the rest of the world. And before we continue on our philosophical tangent, that, I believe, concludes our intrigue section.
110%. Just the last closing words that we have is, as with all of our reviews, we want to personally thank the person in this case. I know there's a huge team behind all of this and behind the adventure module itself, but I hugely want to thank Christoff for allowing us, trusting us to review this freely and fairly. And like you said to us, it's all about supporting one another in this community, in this industry, and we're so happy to have been given this opportunity and your material to review. It was fantastic, and we look to see what more comes out with the subsequent adventure modules.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for the wonderful opportunity. We hope to keep in touch, and let's keep this community strong and healthy.
110%. So, as always, guys, thank you so much. If you would like to reach out and talk with James and I, again, all the links are down below. And if you'd like us to review some of your material, we would absolutely love to. So be sure to reach out to us and check us out on all our social medias.
Until then,
we will
see you through the rift.
Other than that,
our final total scoring for this project is a solid 8.5 out of 10. Now, once again, we just want to reiterate that just because it doesn't get a 10 out of 10 doesn't mean that it's not good. We actually believe this is a fantastic work. However,
and I was just going to say, and one that you should definitely go and look at, if not instantaneously go and pick up, because this is something that is truly unique, rich, and will be really rewarding for a table that it is well suited for.
Absolutely. If you're already playing in a D12 system, this is going to be a great addition, and the world and universe that has been created here is phenomenal.
And I was going to say, and if you're looking at trying something new and going outside of your typical bounds, or if you're completely new to TTRPGs in general, this could be a really very fascinating and interesting starting point for you. And just the last thing that I'd note in that, again, right, is an 8.5 means that it's practically almost perfect. We don't like to give out perfect scores here on the channel because, with anything, like, there is no true perfect 10 out of 10.
Unless it's Matt Mercer.
9.9. 9.9. Okay. Anyways, yeah. So just the last thing to talk about is our typical question in terms of, is this work indicative of what the author or authors is known for? And since this is a new studio, Black Void Games, and honestly, like, for us, is this typical of them? Well, yes, because it's kind of their name's sake. This is what they're known for. Is this unique campaign setting, and the authors that have worked on this have worked on multiple other projects before as well.
So in closing, I'd really just like to say this is an amazing work. Yeah, we don't like to give perfect scores, but it's still definitely worth a look, and all that information is down in the description below. Go check it out. Links to their website, links to the Kickstarter. We'll even pull that one out too.
And when you're watching this, it will be the last day. This will have literally been in the process of releasing, so still try and get in there if you still have enough time. If not, go ahead and pick this up. It's something that we would ultimately recommend that people check out, and that if you're into this a little bit darker theme, that it's something that you definitely should grab. And yeah, as always, all the links to our social media and ways to contact us are down below as well. If you would like us to review one of your products as well, be sure to just send us an email to our Gmail down there. And yeah.
I think that brings us to the close.
Yeah.
We will see
See
you
you through the rift.